it's stuff here. Like there are so many things that you can take advantage of using Webflow basically, right? So this is just one, this is just their site. It's another site, right? Like you can already tell, like if you design or if you had any coding experience, you can already tell that stuff is overlapping each other. It's very colorful. I mean, I can imagine giving some of my dear friends to do this. I mean, they can do it, but some of them be like, why are you stressing me? Like, what's the point? Why is everything flying around like this? Right? Or you can do it if you want to. Like, it's just basically you have that freedom to try out different stuff. So this is just like one of those sites that they flex basically, right? So this is another one. This is another one, right? This is someone's portfolio that he used Webflow to build it basically. So that's another application of Webflow. Like if you want to do personal stuff for yourself, you can do it. And there are all these little custom stuff, like the way the custom moves and the way um, elements interact with the cursor, changing color, things like that. You have such granular control of what you can build with it, right? Here's another example. These people used made a little interaction here where it's like a quiz. So you drag the right answer to this point, and then something happens based on that. Right? Like you have so much you can try around, you can play around. Like there are very few limits, or practically not much limits to what you can try out with stuff like this. Right? So I'll just give like some more examples. Stuff like this. Like you can build this in Webflow. So you don't have to design around the templates. You can build whatever you want to build. Like there have been different types of designs that I've shown here, right? Like people are doing crazy stuff with Webflow basically. So if you're curious and want to see more, you can always go to their showcase, which is this link here, just webflow.com/website/Webflow. And you can just have a feel around of what's going on there. So why Webflow? Webflow is basically for anyone who wants to build sites like I've shown you already, right? You are a designer who wants to build your portfolio or a personal website or a client's stuff you designed, and you want to have total control of what it looks like without contracting it out to a developer, right? You can do that. Or you're a developer that wants to build something quickly or faster than you would have if you were hard coding it, right? Or someone was given a custom design, or you have a custom design, and some designs just can't be built with templates, like they are too unique for that, right? Or you are a company or startup, and you want to bring out promotional sales pages very quickly. Like if you have someone who can build with Webflow on your team, you can go very quickly. An example is the Spire team, right? Like they have people there that can build the workflows so they can easily iterate on their sites without having to do so much back and forth, right? So Webflow can let you achieve so much if you're anyone, basically, right? But we have to talk about some caveats. What Webflow isn't. Webflow isn't a replacement for developers. I mean, we've gone through several phases of this, right? Dreamweaver, Squarespace, Wix, whatever, right? WordPress. These things will never replace developers. So don't think that, oh, okay, we're going to put developers out of business. That's not, developers build these tools. They'll most likely always be just for developers. Workflow is basically giving what was typically something that you had to contract to someone to do. It gives you the power to do it yourself. And that's basically what no code tools do, right? Webflow is not necessarily what someone used to build a product, right? So I've spent a lot of time looking at no code tools like Zapier, Webflow, Bubble. There are apps that let you build apps without code, right? But it's not, I wouldn't recommend building your MVP with a no code tool unless you know what the constraints are. So basically know what your needs are and do your research around it before you go all in to build an MVP. But if you have a website, a basic, not basic, but a custom experience that you want to do, Webflow is perfect for that. Webflow isn't entirely drag and drop. I know it's marketed as drag and drop, but it's not drag and drop in the way we do. So if you have a PowerPoint presentation or you use Figma or you use Canva, there's a way the drag and drop is where you can drop elements anywhere on the canvas and it will be there. Webflow doesn't work that way because of some certain constraints that I will get into eventually. But it's still drag and drop, but not in the way we're used to. So there are some things you need to know, right, before you jump in. So you need to understand the basis of how a site is structured and presented, and you need to understand the box model. So there's a reason why Webflow typically has a steep learning curve for new people. It's because they are hit with the realization that, oh, I actually have to understand how a site is structured, right? I can't just jump in and drop stuff on the page and it's magically work, right? So that's some stuff I'm about to explain now. So HTML and CSS, which is the scary term that most people run away from. I won't even like CSS is hard, but you don't have to know HTML and CSS in depth, but you should be able to understand what it is for and how the basis of some of these things work, so that you are not struggling so much to understand why some things are working. But at the end of the day, the way Webflow is, as you are building with Webflow, you will automatically learn basic HTML and CSS. So it's not something that is a barrier for you to know before you enter, right? So when you think of HTML, think structure and content. When you think of CSS, think looks and presentation. And I'll explain that with the next couple of slides, right? So this is a screenshot of Amazon's website. On the left, you have what the final site looks like with CSS added. And on the left, you have the CSS, on the right, you have the HTML. So HTML is basically structure, like I said, you have structure and content. So your buttons, your links, your images, it's not bothered about how it looks, it's bothered about what is there. It's like a skeleton of your site, the skeletal structure of your site. CSS is now what will make the HTML look presentable and look fine and look amazing, right? So another example is Wikipedia. This Wikipedia screenshot where you have on the right, you have what it would be with just HTML. And on the left, you have what it looks like after it has been made presentable. So you have the box model, right? This is part of the things that you need to understand before you even open Webflow, or you might be lost. Basically, with the box model, you should see everything as a box, even if it doesn't look like a box. Everything on the web is contained within the boundary of a rectangular box. And I'll show you examples now. So looking at this Apple website, right? You have all these different contacts here, right? But everything is in a box. You just can't see it, right? So here you have the iPhone image in a box. You have different sections. Everything is in boxes, right? And this is how a web is rendered. This is how things are shown and things are structured, right? So when you understand that everything is basically a rectangular box, is one of the first steps to being able to do stuff, right, without being as confused. So this is another example. I'm sure with the last example, like if you can try to mentally picture where the boxes are, you can probably figure out that around the iPad image, there's a box. Around the iPad Air, there's a box, stuff like that. So this is generally what it would be like, right? I'm not saying this is how the sites were built, but I'm saying this is how you should start thinking about designs if you want to build them. So this is another one, a very simple example. So you have the box around the button, the box around the text, the box around, so you can have boxes inside boxes, right? So the box around the box with the button and the text, and then the box around the section on its own. And using Slack as an example, right, you can also see that everything is in boxes as well. Like the more you think in boxes, the easier it is to understand where the boxes will most likely be. right? So you can see the navbar, the hero section, the logos, everything is inside boxes, right? So using Asana's, this is just another example, Asana's website, right? You can see the boxes. So it's a new way of looking at thinking about things that you should not see stuff as elements in arbitrary position, but you see them as stuff inside boxes, right? So parts of the box, you have your content, right? Everything, whatever is inside the box, right? So in this particular example, this iPad Air and everything is the content, right? You have the padding. The padding is basically the space around the content. So it's between the content and the border, right? If this is a little bit too difficult to follow, you'll probably understand where I actually show you in the practical aspects, right? You have the border. So the padding in this example is the white area, right? The border is the yellow line. And borders are typically invisible in the web, right? So you most likely won't see it unless the developer made it visible, right? So that's why there's no box, right? That's why you hardly see boxes around the web because the borders are not shown, but they are there, right? And imagine if there's the space outside the box, right? So you can use all of these to manipulate the boxes, and that's basically how you build, right? You build in this manner with this stuff in your mind, like you know that everything is a box, and the boxes interact with each other. Boxes are inside boxes. There's space around boxes. There's space between boxes, and you basically have to start thinking in that manner, basically. So I'm going to explain more practically, right? And we're going to jump into Webflow. Um, So I found this file, right? And we're going to visually build this. So based on everything I've said so far, we should already be able to break down this design mentally into boxes, right? So you should assume that this is a box. These are individual boxes. This image is a box. This section, this area is a box. This is a box. This button is within a box. This area is a box, right? And to make things easier to visualize, I came up with this, right? So I already know that if I'm going to build this, I'm going to have to consider everything as a box here. So let me just take a break from talking about boxes and go into Webflow to do a brief introduction into the UI. Right? So this is one of those tools that, like Photoshop, you don't have to know everything at once. You just need to know what you need to use at that particular point in time. So I'm not going to explain everything in the UI. I'm just going to point out what we need to know for the purposes of this particular presentation. Right. So this white area is the canvas. This is where you do all your magic. This is where you drop all sorts of stuff. Right? Uh, this area is the navigator. So your layers are going to show here. Think of it as layers if you're a designer, or your content and components, so everything will show here in this area. If you want to add an element into Webflow, you come here, right? So these are the multiple stuff you can add. This is where the drag and drop aspect comes in. So I can drag a heading inside here and I can manipulate it, right? The difference is I can't drag a heading to the bottom of the page. I have to go there. It doesn't work that way. Stuff is stacked one after the other on top of each other. And you're going to have to start looking at things in that way. Now there are ways to make stuff overlap, but that's a bit more advanced for now. So that was just for the purposes of this for that example. If I want to add anything, there are multiple stuff I can add. Um, I can add a heading, paragraph, text. I can add images, videos. I can add forms. I can add nav bars, random stuff. There's so much stuff that I can do here, but I'm not going to get into too much of it so that it doesn't seem too overwhelming. Right. So talking about boxes again, right? everything in this layout area, um, they are all boxes. They are all special types of boxes. So you have your section, you have your container, you have your grid, and you have your columns. Typically, you won't necessarily use all of these, right? What I typically use is section and div block. Now, the reason I use section is basically when you're building a site, you want to divide it into sections for some SEO type stuff that I don't necessarily need to explain now. So what I typically do is I have a section. So going back to this design now, I can assume that this entire area is a section. So I'm going to put all of my boxes for this set for that area inside that section, right? So so that's the use of a section. It's basically a fancy box. A div is also a div is also a name for a box. Div is the basic box. Like you keep using divs to structure your stuff. So you want to put a paragraph. I prefer to put everything inside divs. So I'm going to delete everything I've done so far and go back to the design. So right now we have the heading. I mean, I said the heading, the navbar, right? And one of the things Webflow has done for us is that we don't have to design our navbar from scratch. So we can just drag and drop from the component section here. You can just drag and drop a navbar in there. So now coming back to my navigator to explain what's going on here. So you have your body. Your body is the topmost element, right? And everything is inside the body. So assume your body is the biggest box. And then the nav bar here is a box inside the body. So inside the nav bar now, you have a container, which is basically another fancy box, basically. So you have this branch, this box here. You have your nav menu, which is this area here. And you have your nav links, which is these guys here. Right? The reason why you typically want to use Webflow's navbar, unless your navbar is super custom, is that yeah, navbar is very responsive. So to talk about responsiveness, I'm going to come to this top area here, right? These icons here signify your viewports, and a viewport is basically the different screen sizes. So when you're building a site, you want to think about multiple screen sizes, and Webflow lets you do that. So you have your base grade points, which is your desktop, laptop, stuff like that. You have your tablets, right? Which is how ideally your your website should look on tablets. Anything you want to do tablets, you do it here. You have your mobile landscape if the mobile view is split, and then you have your mobile view. So you can already see why if you can if you're a bit observant, you'll have already seen that there's a difference between how the navbar looks on web and how it looks on mobile. It already has a hamburger menu, right? So rather than having to build the navbar for every viewport, Webflow has already made my process easier for me. So I just have to edit the navbar that they gave me. Right. So coming back to this one, I can already tell that I have 4 nav links. So I just have to edit what is currently here. And I'm just going to point out that there are some best practices that I've been skipping because of time. So there are some things you generally want to do first before you even start uh, building anything. You want to make sure your font files are ready. You want to make sure you have a style guide. You want to make sure you have like so much stuff, but not so much stuff, but different stuff in place. But because I'm just building a simple hero section, there's some things I just jumped. Right. So I'm going to go back to the body. And in this particular site, one of the first things I'm noticing is the fonts, right? And I've already added the fonts. So I'm just going to go back to the workflow and check this area. So this area on the right basically lets you manipulate your elements, right? So you can, in this section, you can change the sizing. In this section, you can change the positioning, like the positioning properties. In this area, you can edit type, your typography. in this area, you can change your background colors and things like that, right? But for here, the I'm just going to change the font of the body. And I think the font is this font here. So another thing to note is that for every change you make to a top element, it affects all the elements inside it. So that's why when I changed the font of the body, it also affected the font of the navbar, right? So now that I've done that, I don't have to think about going to each and every element and be changing the font. I've already done it in one place, right? So going back to the design, I was talking about the navbar. I already know I have like 4 nav links. So there are 2 ways I can work on this. I can either select it in the canvas and just copy and paste, or I can select it in the navigator here and copy and paste. So I have 4 nav links now. So just to change it to home, about us, resources, and contact us. So another thing is missing here is the logo, right? So typically, if you have a design, you want to export your logos and illustrations in SVG. I've already done that. So I'm just going to drag and drop it from my downloads folder here. So that's another thing, right? You don't necessarily have to come here to be dragging stuff in. You can move images from your device directly into where you want it to go, so long as it's within the boundaries of the box. Right. So I'm not going to be able to drag an image and drop it in this area of the screen because it just doesn't work that way. I'm going to have to either clear this entire area with other boxes of other stuff, or I would have had to go advanced and change the positioning of the box. So that's part of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that it's not the drag and drop that we are used to. You can't just randomly throw an element anywhere on these sites. You're going to have to systematically go through it. Right. So another thing that's wrong with this navbar is that the navbar has a gray background and ours doesn't. Right. So for backgrounds, I'm going to come to this area and scroll to this area. Right. I'm going to make sure that my navbar is selected, and I'm going to go to this backgrounds area. So this color is gray, so I'm just going to change it to white, right? And that solves that particular issue. Another issue that I'm potentially seeing is the font sizes, right? So ideally, you don't want to change your font sizes individually, but since this is just a simple site, I'm going to check this particular font. It's the size is 20. Size of this one is 14. So that's part of the reasons why I looked at this for. So another thing to learn is that when you're working on a Webflow site, there's something called classes, right? And in this area is where you work with classes. So a class basically lets me reuse a property without having to redo it again. So I know that I've edited this nav link here and Webflow automatically names it. There are naming conventions for Webflow automatically names it's like in Figma where you have group 1, group 2, group 3. It's not ideal, but that's how it is. So you are the one that now decides to use proper naming conventions. So in this particular area now, I know I want this particular property to reflect around these other properties. So I'm going to copy this um, this name, select the other nav links, and just paste. So I don't have to go into each element and start changing it and all of that. Because I don't have to create multiple classes. I can just use one class for multiple elements. Right. So we can work with this for now. So coming back here, we're already seeing that we've done something like this. So now we have another box, which is this entire section, right? So I'm going to go back and drag a section in. Remember that a section is just a passive box, right? It has reasons why you should use it, but just for now, think of it as a box. Now I'm going to drag a div inside, which is another type of box, right? But sectioning is same thing for sectioning as dividing your website into different chunks. And think of a div as a box for any purpose I want to use it for. Right? So looking at the navigator, we're going back to the same concept of stuff you add to Webflow goes in one after the other. It goes on top. The next one is at the bottom of the last one, right? So it's kind of like in this hierarchy that you have to follow, at least when you are building something basic like this, right? So I have a section. You can see it from my cursor. I have a section here, and I have a div block inside the section. So I can look at this entire area as a section, and I can look at this box as a div, right? So the next thing I'm saying is that this div has a particular width, right? So I'm going to copy how wide the width is from here. Come and make sure that my div block is selected here and look for the size area and paste my width, right? There's another thing to mention, which is I'm using pixels now because it's just the easiest to explain. The more advanced you go, you're going to learn about different types of units to use for building your websites that it makes it easier to make stuff responsive. So right now I'm using pixels. That means for each breakpoint, I'm going to have to edit it. But if I'm using something like percentages, or I'm using something like rems and EMs and stuff, I can set the sizes of my elements to change depending on the properties of the device I'm using. But that's by the way for now. So you can probably already see visually that it has changed the size of the div. So another thing I'm going to check now is this stuff is centralized. So a quick hack to make stuff centralized in Webflow is to just come and click this button area here. So it's centralized. So I've handled this outer box now. So now I have two smaller boxes, one box for this area and one box for this other area here for this image. Right. So basically go back, make sure my where I want the boxes to go is selected. I'm going to come here, drag another div block inside. So visually you can see the elements that are inside each other, right? So this is the section. Then you can tell that this div block 6 is inside section. You can tell that this div block is inside this section. So rather than dragging another one, I already have one here, so I can just copy and paste. Right. So but I have a new program, which is these boxes are side by side, but we typically stack stuff on top of each other. Right. So that's where I'm coming to meet display properties. So in this area, you have um, your display properties. So you can set your display to flex, to grid, multiple stuff, and you can even hide your boxes. But for now, we're just going to look at flex. So flex lets me arrange boxes in vertical, horizontal manners, and I can also align my boxes to be centered, to justify, to left, to right. Right. So I'm currently selecting the outer box so that because that's what I want the flex to affect. And I'm going to select this button, which means set to flex. So now the default state is horizontal. Right. So I'm going to go back to this part. And I already know that I want the image to be in the second box here. So I've exported it already. So I'm just going to drag and drop it in here. So that solves one problem. The other problem now is I have to figure out how to put this other stuff inside. So I have a heading, I have body copy, and I have my button, right? Um, So one thing I like to do, like I said, is to put everything inside divs, right? So I already know I'm going to need three divs inside this box here. So I'm just going to go back. It's basically a repetitive process of drag one box in here. Since I already know it stacks on top of each other, right? Copy and paste, right? So I already have like three boxes now. So the next thing is the heading, right? I'm going to uh, come back here and come to this typography section and just drag my heading in here. So here it's asking me what type of heading I want, right? In building websites for SEO purposes and basically search engine optimization, and basically just for hierarchy, you want to have different types of headings. You want to have your heading 1, your heading 2, your heading 3, if possible, heading 4, heading 5, right? So in this design, this is the first heading, and this is the heading with the highest hierarchy. So it's going to be heading 1. It's going to be heading 1. So heading 1 is already automatically selected, so I can just click out or close this. So I know that that's my heading 1. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here. Right. So that's the first one. Then for body copy, right? For supporting copy, I'm going to copy this and go back to Webflow. So for that, I want to use something called paragraphs. So back to this typography section, I want to drag a paragraph into this div, and it's filled with dummy content for me. So I'm just going to paste the actual content that's supposed to be there, right? When I go back, I realize that, oh, I need to put a button here. So I'm going to come back to the part where I add elements and look for where the button is, which is here, and just drag it here, right? So on the site, I have everything. I have everything that's supposed to be here, except for the button text. I'm going to change that button text. Choose text. Right. So I have everything content-wise on the site. Now is to start styling the content. So the first thing I'm going to look at is this heading, right? The heading is medium with 50 pixels size and a line height of 65 pixels, right? So I'm going to come back here, come to this, make sure the elements that I want to edit is selected, come to this area, look for the typography section, which I'm at here, change the size to 50, change the height to 65, I believe. Yeah, then come back here, look for the size of this, which is 24, and the line height is 35. Come back here, edit that, and edit this. So if you've been noticing, every time I change an element, whatever is here changes. Whenever I change a new element, whatever is here changes. Webflow is automatically assigning classes to it. So if I want to ever reuse this styling properties here, I'm just going to either copy this and paste it elsewhere, or name whatever I want to name this particular class here. Right. So the next thing is the button, and it has a width of 225 pixels and a height of 70 pixels according to what is here. So I'm just going to come here, look for the size panel, change it to 225, and what's the size again? The height is 70, and change it to 70. And then I'm also going to check out the background color. So the background color is this hex code here. I'm just going to copy it, look for the background section, and change the color. The next thing I'm going to look at is the border radius, right? And here it's showing 20. So I'm just going to go back to the button, look for the section under backgrounds, which shows borders. Here you can manipulate the borders we talked about. And the border radius here, I'll just change it to 20, right? So we now have another problem, which is the fact that this stuff isn't centralized. So a trick I found out is styling buttons is just the flex, go back to flex, um, set the align and justify properties to center, and you're good to go. So the next thing is the button size and the text size inside the button, which is 20 pixels. So I'm just going to change that here, and we're good, right? But then there's something we skipped over, which is the text color. So I'm just going to go back to the text color and copy this, select this element, go back to the typography section, paste, color is changed. Check if the color of this is the same, noise difference, copy, make sure the text is selected, come back here, paste, right? So we have that, but then it's still looking different, right? Okay, this is medium, so I'm going to change this to medium, but then still not looking like our design. So going back to the box, right? This has boxes surrounding them. I can even argue that this is a box on its own, right? This is a box inside another box. So I'm just going to click on this and check the width, which is 561. Come back to this heading, look for the box above it, which is the boxes inside. Change the width to 581, and it's in the bounding. It's already behaving like we want it to behave. Come back to the design, select this, copy the width property. I don't like editing the width of text. That's why I put everything inside the block. So I'm just going to append the div block and not the text itself. So paste the width higher here, right? So it's starting to look more like what we want. So this is now where the margin padding stuff comes in. So if you remember everything we talked about so far, in this particular area now, right? This is the content, and this area is the padding. This area around it is the padding. This is the content. This area around it is the padding, right? So for this particular one, I'm mostly just going to edit the padding top, which is this area, and I'm going to check what the gap of that is, and that is 138 pixels, right? So I'm going to look for that particular box, which is this one, and come to the spacing area. So this spacing area lets you edit your margin and your padding, right? So this area, these four buttons, these four numbers are for editing your padding. And then these areas are for editing your margin. So think of this small box as your content, this area around the content as your padding, and this area around the box as your margin. So I know that I want to edit the padding. So I'm going to click this 0 and just paste. No, not paste, because I don't copy it. 138 pixels or so, something like that, right? So now it's looking more like I want it to look like. But then there's still some minute details like the spacing between each of these elements. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to edit this particular one. So the spacing between this button and this text is 41. So I'm going to go to the bounding box, the box that has the button inside, and I'm going to come back to this area. But in this situation, it's not padding. I'm choosing to edit the margin because it's the area outside the box. So this is the top margin that I'm going to edit. So I'm going to change this particular area to 41, right? So that's that. It's mostly looking like what we want it to look like now. But we have another problem, which is the navbar. So the navbar, the default navbar comes in a container, and the container has a specific width. So I'm just going to come here and add my own div that I can change the, remember that we are bringing elements inside. So this element is inside this navbar. So it's still part of the navbar. So I'm going to change the width of this to what I want it to be, which should be this. So I'm just going to copy that and paste the width here, then make sure it's centralized. So I'm just going to drag all of these elements out of the container. I don't have to worry too much. I just need to make sure that they are in the right position. Webflow handle the rest for me. So I can just delete the container, right? So I'm going to look at one more thing. Okay, this isn't the width I should have used. I should have used the same width I used for this area. So I'm going to hunt down that particular box, which is this outside box, copy this, look for that div I just made, change the width, and now everything should align. So I think there's one last thing for this area, which is this area. So again, you have this box, you have the area around the box, and the area inside the box and all of that stuff. So for this, I'm just going to edit the top margin, which is going to be the space between the navbar and the top of the design. So that should be 75 pixels. So I'm going to select the navbar, which is this guy, go to the top of this area, type 75, and I'm done. Right. This is basically, there's still some stuff I can fine tune, right? Uh, there's another thing I need to do, which is not really a big deal, but you can come to the justify area. And I know that I want my elements to be at the edges of the box. So if you look at this particular box now, it's showing that this image is too close to the edge. So you left edge. So I can just set this justify property to space between, and it handles that for me. It's if you didn't really get that, don't worry so much. It's when the more you use it, the easier it will be to understand. Right. So we can assume that I'm done with implementing the header. So if I want to preview what it looks like, I can come to this eye area and just select it, right? And this is what it looks like, right? If I want to publish it and send it probably to maybe a client or to test it or just see what it looks like, I can come here and click publish to this area and publish to selected domains and click this button. And this is what the site looks like. Right? So that's for web, right? So if I now want to edit for how it looks like on different viewports, I'll have to come back here and change some stuff. I'm not going to edit the tablet screen. I'm just going to jump straight to mobile because of time. So now everything is out of proportion because I set everything to pixels before. So I'm going to have to come back here to make sure that all my elements fit into the viewports. So I'm going to go in and change each of the pixel sizes. So the design didn't have a mobile screen, so I'm just going to have to use my discretion. In this area, this div area, I can already tell that this is too wide. So maybe I'll make it like 300 pixels, right? This div block, probably too wide, make it 300 pixels. Same thing for this area. Let's just make it 200, save our time. Yeah, but the what's it called? The text is still too big. So I'm gonna come here and change it to let's say that's a 4 pixels. Let's just change this to maybe like 32 or so. Change this to let's say 16. Uh, let's say 30 or something. And it looks better on mobile already. But I can now come and add padding. So I can add like left padding, right padding, so that stuff isn't too close to the edge of the screen, right? So the reason I'm doing this is on each viewport, you kind of have to check what it looks like on each viewport. So you have that power and that control. So I know that if I preview this on mobile, it's most likely going to look like this, right? So there's one more thing, which is this area. So remember I mentioned that setting stuff to flex gives you the power to make stuff horizontal or vertical. So you know that this is supposed to be vertical on mobile because there's just no space. So I'm just going to come here and set it to vertical, right? And this image is already too big, so let me just set the width to like 300 pixels. So it already looks like this on mobile. So I can review. And if I want to tweak anything, I can still tweak. I can reduce the padding here. I can reduce the margin here. I can make the stuff more aligned, reduce the logo, different stuff like that. But that's based on the description and based on the design it was in. And Webflow already has Webflow automatically generated a hamburger menu and that section for me, right? So that's generally the summary. And one last thing, I'm just going to show a basic interaction, right? So if I want to make this image animate in, I can come to this area, this lightning area, and select element trigger or page trigger. So an element trigger is basically the elements would animate if something happens to the elements. So if you have a mouse click, mouse over, scrolling to view, stuff like that. A page trigger is based on what happens to the entire page. So if the page loads, we can make this image do something. If the page is scrolled, we can make this image do something. But for now, I'm just going to make it be based on scrolling to view, which is an element trigger. So when scrolling to view, I can select an action. So I'm going to use a quick animation, which is slide in. I'm going to move, select here and move from the right. The previews. So that's a quick animation. If I want to make this guy animate from the bottom, I can do scrolling to view, select an action, slide or fade, or any other thing that's there. I know we start from the bottom. Previews. Right, these are just basic animations you can do. And I can just publish my sites when I'm done. Refresh here. And voila. So that's just the basics of how to use the tool. There are way more stuff you can do. I was gonna stop here for now for some time. And if you want to learn more, I'm doing a course with the Mars at Overlay Academy. Overlay Academy invited us to do a Webflow course, so you can check that out at Overlay Academy. You can also check out Webflow University. Webflow does courses, so you can go there for more. And there's a guy I keep checking on YouTube for his Webflow videos, and that's Timothy Ricks. So you can check him out. Right. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, let me know. And you can also reach out to me on Twitter if you have any. I'll try to respond. And yeah, so we've reached the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks a lot for that session. So if there are questions, please drop it on the chat box, or you could mute your mic and just speak. Are there any questions? There's a question on the chat box by
Hello, good evening. I have a question.
Please. Could you hold on,
Hello.
please, Emmanuel?
Hello, good evening.
We can hear you, Emmanuel. Please hold on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you for the section. Please, how can we link this whole design to JavaScript?
Okay, so there are two. There's a way you can do it, right? You don't typically code in Webflow, like if you are doing interactions and stuff. But there's an area here. If you want to add your own custom code, you can come here. There's a settings on up here. So you come to the page settings, and there's an area for code. So you can add, if you want to add your own CSS, you can add it here. If you want to add your own JavaScript, you can add it here, right? So Webflow gives you the opportunity to add your own code in case you have your own code you want to use. And there's also an option to export code if you want to maybe host your website elsewhere, or you want to manipulate the code on your own or something like that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. So Zainab asked a question earlier. She's asking the difference between a container and a div block. Which one is
Okay,
best to use
so
for design?
a container is a div block with with a predetermined width, right? So Webflow has a basic um, container that it uses. So the idea behind that container is to make sure that your elements don't go past a certain point, right? So ideally, you probably put this area inside the container. So you can use the container if you want. I just don't like using it because larger, I prefer more control over my divs. So I typically just put a div and call it container and just use it, set my own sizes to it, right? But you can use a container. A container just basically a div with a size that's been set by Webflow already. I don't know if that
Okay, I think
answers
that
your question.
answers Zainab's question. Okay. Ajala Michael is also asking, what could be happening if your website isn't responding, if it's not showing after publishing it, and complaining about SSL issue?
This typically won't happen with Webflow, but if it does, you might want to check with maybe your domain hosting, or you could probably look for the particular problem and check their support, because this shouldn't be an issue. So maybe something that is unique to you. Or you could also check their forum if there's anyone having a similar issue to you. But I haven't particularly come across an SSL issue when I've been using Webflow. But yeah, you could reach out to me and maybe we can figure it out together.
Okay. He says thank you. So are there any other questions? You could omit your
Hello.
mic to speak.
Hello.
Alex.
No. Okay. So I just have I'm trying to use the flow for a while now, but there's an issue with it, the blank page where I can't add the white canvas. Instead I have a black page, so I haven't add anything or a paragraph. I just can't add in all those things and all. So I don't know if that happened to you before or
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the issue.
okay. So I said I opened a Webflow account like last year, and I've trying to use it since then, but each time I just open a new each time I want to do a new design, there's always like a black canvas instead of the white one that just was showed. So I can't even start, with an editing. I can't do all of that. I can't add an editing paragraph. So I don't know if it's an issue that you've encountered or it's a common one, or maybe I just have to open another account. I don't know. Or
Have
maybe it's
you
because
have
it's a
you
free
have you
account.
created two projects on Webflow? Like
No,
is it a free account?
there's a free
Maybe
account.
they are limiting what you can do based on what you have there already.
Okay, so like, then solution. I have to create
Uh,
another one.
so one option, because I'm not entirely sure what the problem is, but one option is if you have two projects already, you can just delete one and try and create another one and see if that works. If it doesn't work, then it's probably an issue with the accounts.
Okay. So what's the maximum project you can create with Webflow?
So in Webflow, you can only have like two projects on a free account. So basically, the idea is to let you test the waters, and they
Mm.
hope you will come and pay. Basically, but yeah, you can have like you can have two projects, and you can even start like building stuff with those two projects. But eventually, there'll be a limit, and at some points, you're probably going to have to pay. But to learn Webflow, you don't need to pay anything. You just have those two projects and you can like do whatever you want to do within the limits.
Okay. Okay. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thanks a lot, Daniel. That's as much as we can take for the night. So I dropped his social media handles for us to follow in case we have further questions, we need clarification on some things. So let me just drop it again. That's how much we can take this night. So okay. So these sessions basically hold every single Sunday. So in case you are not aware, we are having another speaker next week Sunday by 8 o'clock to talk on another topic entirely. So you could also follow us on our social media handles to keep in touch and get the information we will pass across during the week. So the session is being recorded and will be made available during the week as well. So that's basically all for the night. Thank you very much, Daniel. The session has been amazing. Thanks a lot. Good night, everyone.